Welcome, everyone. We're right at 2:30. We're going to give some people a few minutes to trickle in, but we'll get started in the next minute or two. All right, everyone, we'll get started. I want to thank each of you for your participation on what is the second Metrc user call. My name is John Hudak. I'm the director of the Office of Cannabis Policy. And like I said, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you today for this Q&A session. This is the second one in a series of calls that we're going to continue to do. I want to briefly introduce to you my colleagues who are on the call. In advance of getting into the Q&A, I do want to ask you all for at least a little bit of patience in terms of the logistics because of scheduling issues, because of some COVID exposure isolation. We are currently operating in different spaces. And so for questions that I'm going to have some of my colleagues jump in with answers on, we might have to remind people they're on mute. There might be a little bit of a pause, but we're old pros at this point, all of us having gone through this for the past few years. So to introduce my colleagues, first, Vern Malik is on the call. He's the Deputy Director of Operations for OCP. Lisa Roberts is on the call. She's Deputy Director of Strategic Initiatives. John Gagnon, the Director of Data Analytics. Lexi Susi, the Director of Media and Stakeholder Relations. Tracy Jakes, the Director of Special Projects. And Sarah McNeil, who's our Stakeholder Engagement Assistant. We're here today because of the recommendations made during last year's Metrc user work group. As the work group members made us aware, licensees really don't have a direct way of sharing feedback with Metrc. So we aim to help achieve that through this call and calls like it. We know there's more work to be done in terms of improving the communication. But the first call I thought was very productive in terms of hearing some of the concerns and questions that you all had and to be able to get those answers back from Metrc. As I noted, the purpose of this call is really a Q&A session. We want to talk through the challenges, the frustrations, the opportunities, what is and isn't working with Metrc, and we encourage you to keep questions and comments limited to the Metrc software. In terms of next steps, we know we're not Metrc, and so although we may not be able to answer all of your questions today, we're going to do our best to do so. But we're committed to relaying in writing all of the questions that you have, particularly the ones that we don't have answers for immediately, to solicit feedback from Metrc and to keep them abreast as well as to the concerns that you're having. Metrc, as happened after the first user call, provided comments back to us, and that's going to continue. We put a link into the chat. We put a link into the chat about their comments based on the first Metrc user call. So if you weren't able to read through that, you can go through and read the Q&A. We've also put on OCP's YouTube channel the first Metrc user call, and so you can go back and listen to that as well. As I noted, we're going to do our best to answer the questions that you have. And so with regard to the first Metrc user call, some of the questions that were asked, we gave the answers to, and so they won't necessarily appear in the follow-up document, but the questions that we wanted to pass along to Metrc, they of course do. Before we formally segue into the meeting, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to go over. It's important that we keep things respectful. There's plenty of passion in this industry, which is a big part of the reason why it's succeeding. But please keep comments and questions focused on the issues we're here to resolve. And most importantly, please show respect for each other. This meeting is being recorded. The video and transcript will be shared after the meeting on OCP's YouTube page, just as the first Metrc user call was. So please know that anything shared here today will be of public record. We'll use the hand raise feature on Zoom. If you can use the raised hand feature, the emoji rather, in Zoom's reaction function, that'll help us to direct traffic. If you are having some trouble with that, please feel free to physically raise your hand or to drop your question into the chat directly. Most importantly, so we know who we're talking to, and if we need to follow up with anyone, we can do so. Please introduce yourself and the business you're coming from before asking your question. Next, I want to solicit some feedback from each of you. While we have some licensees here today, we also had some questions that we'd like to quickly get some input on. The first one, and you can feel free to drop the answer to this into the chat function after I ask it. What's your preferred time for industry events that are put on by OCP? Industry events like this one. Does this afternoon time work well for you, or would you prefer to see our events offered at another time? Morning, around lunch, in the early evening, etc. So please feel free to drop those into the chat, and our team will keep track of those. Second, we've had a couple of inquiries with regard to this, and so using the raised hand function to answer this one, how many of you would prefer to have a Metrc representative attend these quarterly calls in addition to OCP staff? If you're interested in a Metrc representative attending these quarterly calls, I'll give you all maybe 30 seconds to use the raised hand function, and we'll keep track of that. Just a reminder, raising your hand if you'd like to see in the future Metrc representatives join OCP on these Metrc user calls. All right. Thank you all for the feedback. So let's jump in. As a reminder for this call, we'd like to try to take questions by category to have a little bit of order in terms of the issues that people are interested in. First, we'll start with questions about the batch tracking program that we announced earlier in the year. Then in order, we'll take questions related to customer service, functionality and API, training and user experience, reports and testing, and then last, we'll end with any remaining questions, sort of a potpourri round. I'll guide us through each of these categories as we go, but on that note, interested to hear any questions that you all have related to batch tracking. We've got a hand raised from A. Duncan. If you do have a question about batch tracking, please remember to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, unless it was just a holdover from the question prior. Okay, looks like it was a holdover. Any questions about batch tracking? Please remember to use your raise hand function. All right, we'll move on to the next category. Questions related to customer service. Kimber Duncan. Oh, you're muted, Kimber. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Perfect. Yes. So, quick question about customer service. I asked this last time. I'm not sure if we made any leeway with it. So sometimes we have questions that are more emergency, that are more emergent than others. Like if I have a general question about like how to do something within Metrc, they can kind of get back to me whenever they want. But we've had questions that have prevented us from transacting that same day. Is there any way to have like a separate line for more emergency questions? I know the issue that's been brought up is that everybody kind of views their question as an emergency and they all think it's the most important question, but I don't know if maybe Metrc themselves or OCP could draw a line in the sand about what's considered an emergency and what's more generic questions. I just know it's come up a few times where we've needed an answer right away and I've had to wait over 24 hours for it. And it just kind of messes up our schedule. Being so small, we need to do our deliveries, right on our schedule.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kimber. That's obviously, and I do remember your question from the first call. John Gagnon, I think you took that call in the first round. If you want to jump in here.
Yeah, I'm not aware of a dedicated line at this point for an emergency call. So I think it would be a difficult judgment call for Metrc to make, like you say, to judge what's an emergency for one person or another. I did want to take a look at the Metrc responses that we published online. I think that Lexi had published the link to that response to see if they provide any more information on that. So if you bear with me a second, I'm going to pull that up.
Kimber, while John's looking through that, I will say reaching out to our office is always an important way that you can get through. I know that John and his team certainly have, as you noted, Kimber, sometimes everyone thinks their issue is an emergency, but not all emergencies are created equal. And so John and his team have a really good understanding of what could, wait a few hours and what really needs Metrc's attention. And so I know people do reach out to the office pretty regularly, and that's an important step if you're really finding that your problem is not being elevated in the right way or in the way that you believe is the right way with Metrc.
Cool, thank you.
Right, I can add a little bit more to it. So just skimming the document a little bit, it doesn't look like they talk about, again, triaging it to determine what's an emergency versus another. But if you look at the document, it does talk about how the SLA in the contract was set up. And so issues that are tier 1 issues like, hey, I forgot my password, I can't get into the system, things like that. That has a different service level agreement turnaround time. So issues like that, those should be resolved within a 24-hour turnaround period. And taking a look at the reports we've already received from Metrc, we've seen a dramatic turnaround time for that. As a matter of fact, the report that I got from May is showing that those level 1 tickets that have come in, those are turning around in as short as 1 hour in most cases for May. They were averaging. So hopefully folks on the front lines are seeing those improved performance times. Again, it's not that tier that you were looking for emergency versus less important, but at least hopefully you're seeing some of that improvement on your side.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
All right, any additional questions on customer service? All right. The next category is functionality and API. Any questions related to functionality and API? Helena? And then A. Duncan. But Helena, please go first. Remember to unmute yourself and to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Helena. I am from Coastal Route. My question is regarding API. So the API changed between Nova and Metrc, and we weren't made aware of that. And we're just curious if that's something that happens often, and whether or not we can be informed with that, so we know. We haven't experienced it before, so.
Just getting your question down. Definitely, we'll flag this for Metrc to let them know that it's important to make note as best they understand about the changes and that type of functionality that might happen if there are changes to the API. John or Vern, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add to that, or if this has been a flag that you've heard from other licensees as well.
Yeah, if possible, I'd like a few more details on the nature of the change. So I will say that it's not impossible, but it's relatively rare that they make a change in the API that would be considered a breaking change, or would
Okay.
break existing functionality, but it's not impossible. If you wouldn't mind emailing me outside of the meeting, I'd love to hear more details about it. And that would give me something that I can reach out to Metrc and find more details. In general, they're pretty good about publishing it, but maybe this was a case where it only impacted testing facilities. So again, you can reach out to me. It's John, JOHN.R.Gagnon, GAGNON @maine.gov. Send me the details and I promise to look into it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Vern, did you have anything to follow up there?
Well, just in general, I was going to make the comment that changes to the API are really just how third-party integrators and Metrc talk to one another. And so I think a lot of the changes that are made are enhancements to the API, and it's up to the third-party integrator, that's your, Dutchie or BioTrack or whoever you're using, really their responsibility to let you know about a product enhancement or change that's coming. But in the rare event that something wasn't tested thoroughly and created a negative interaction for you, that's the kind of thing, we and Metrc want to know about.
All right, thank you, Helena. A. Duncan.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Alec, and we're going to be entering the Maine market pretty soon here. Just been working with Metrc in Massachusetts up until now, and just had a couple questions. Primarily, are test batches going to be utilized in Metrc in Maine?
John?
Yeah, I think I saw some of these as preliminary questions. I think a lot of that is covered in our rule and testing guidance, and I think we sent you links on that. With the testing batches, I assume you're talking about R&D batches, and that absolutely is spelled out in rule and guidance documents. So yes, they are used in Maine, and you'll want to take a look at that R&D section.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. And then also, will the R&D test batches in Maine, will those be transferable? Let's say a client submits an R&D package for testing and gets a full screen on there. Is it possible for those to be transferred, or do they need to submit under a compliance screen for that?
No, an R&D test is an R&D test. Again, I think it's probably best if you read the rule and the guidance first, and then you can reach out to OCP if you have questions about the rules afterwards. We probably want to keep this call focused really just on Metrc and not our rules.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Kimber, I think you have a follow-up question.
Yeah, no, this is a question about the function of the Metrc program, just a separate one.
Sure.
Sorry, I didn't introduce myself last time. I'm Kimber. I work for Gala, a small adult use cultivator in South Portland. So regarding the function, I had a question about transfers. Actually, two questions. So we had a question under the program rule under transport manifest. We are unclear on something, and we had been doing it wrong a couple times. Where I guess every transport manifest has to be just to one location and back and not multiple locations. So we had this one thing where we had a delivery to 2 different stores owned by the same person, but they were in 2 different towns. And that was not compliant because it was 2 different locations under 1 manifest number. And I get that. We've been doing it right ever since. But my question is, why does Metrc allow us to do that? You can select a separate, like, second location when you go to do your wholesale transfer. It would be really helpful if we could shut that off and then we wouldn't accidentally make mistakes like that. I didn't know if that was an option for Maine.
Vern, I know you've dealt with, sorry, John, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I can take this one if you like, Director Hudak. So Kimber, I absolutely agree with you. I would love to go in there and flip that switch to prevent the multiple locations. I know exactly the scenario you're describing. Unfortunately, that you are correct that in Maine, it's supposed to be 1 destination per transport manifest. That's how it's written down in our rule. I had previously reached out to Metrc to see if that was an enhancement that we could make in Maine to shut it off so that it's in alignment with our rule. But Metrc has a base product that they're trying to have the core of the product for multiple states. And unfortunately, at this point, that's not something that they were able to shut off for us just for Maine because it would impact the other states. But I agree with you that it would be really nice if we had that level of granularity where we could shut it off. It would prevent confusion. I will take one extra step and go a little bit further and just remind folks that there are absolutely things in Metrc that the system will allow you to do that is not compliant behavior in Maine. So it is important to stay up with rules and guidance and policy in Maine. Metrc is not there to be a compliance tool in that sense. You know, so again, it is possible to do non-compliant things in Metrc in Maine. That may seem a little bit counterintuitive, but do keep in mind that, you know, rules change from state to state quite frequently, and it just would be impractical for Metrc as a vendor to custom tailor everything for each individual state. The product would be much more expensive and they'd be spending all their time really kind of trying to keep up with those tweaks instead of trying to build out their product in new areas. So if there was a switch, I would love to throw it for you, but unfortunately in this case, it sounds like that would be a bigger deal for Metrc to do than I wish it was. Sorry about that one.
And Kimber, to follow up briefly on that, this is a question that has popped up in other states as well. So OCP is part of the Cannabis Regulators Association, which is a national association of all of the states that have state adult use and/or medical programs. And this is something at the December conference that popped up multiple times from multiple states as a concern. It's something that I'm happy to have conversations with our colleagues in other states to elevate the volume on that with Metrc. Lisa and I are actually going to be traveling to the June meeting of CANRA next weekend. And so we'll be seeing our colleagues from those states. We'll definitely touch base with them. I believe there will be Metrc representatives at the conference as well. And so an opportunity, I think, for multiple states to raise this issue, because it's not an issue that just Gela is frustrated about. It's not an issue that just Maine licensees are frustrated about. It's definitely something that is escalating in volume, like I said, and I'm happy to help raise that volume even further moving forward.
Cool. I did have one other separate question regarding the function of Metrc. It's different from transfers. So in packages, we have an item titled raw pre-rolls, and basically the strain information doesn't follow that. I know that there are some items that require a strain to follow it and some that don't. So maybe this is just me not understanding something. I'm not sure if it merits everyone's time, but we recently started using the software Canix so that we can have a better user experience with Metrc. It's really helping us bridge that gap. But one thing we noticed is with raw pre-rolls, the strain name doesn't follow it, and then Canix can't categorize it on its end. So I didn't know, I know we just talked about tailoring the program to, Maine. I don't know what's within possibility, but I didn't know if there was a way to add an optional section for us to add a strain to raw pre-rolls, even though it's not required. I know that's kind of specific.
Sorry, just jotting your question down.
Yeah, basically, it was recommended that we use another software like Dutchy or Canix or something to improve our user experience. But this is just the one snafu we found, is that with our raw pre-rolls, the strain name isn't following it, and it's creating some issues as far as categorizing in Canix itself. If it's something we have to work around, then fine. I just didn't know if there was an option in Metrc to help us out with that.
So John or Vern, I'm happy to turn to you if you guys don't have an answer. This is obviously a question we can also elevate to Metrc as well.
I can take this one. So Kimber, yeah, I understand the situation. So yeah, the reason why there isn't a strain for raw pre-rolls is because you could use shaker trim or keef in your raw pre-rolls, and those are not limited to a particular strain. We allow you to mix strains. So in the main specific configuration, we don't make those strain specific. I hear your point about potentially making it an optional field. I'm not sure we considered that. So what I'll do is I'll take that as a follow-up, and I'll explore it a little bit. I can't make any promises right now, but I'll explore the possibility, and I'll get back to you. I'd have to do a bit of research to see what the side effects would be if we added it as an optional field, how that might impact some of our downstream data. So I'll look into it and I'll get back to you and let you know what I find.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay.
All right.
All I had.
Okay, we have a question in the chat. So I'll read it aloud. Sometimes vendors have different methods to track products, even from batch to batch. For example, a pre-roll may come in as an each or by the gram. This makes it very hard for us to match point of sale transactions to the correct unit of measure in Metrc. Is there a way to switch the unit of measure in Metrc to best match how we're going to sell it so that sales are properly recorded? John?
Yeah, so that one's a little bit more straightforward. For purposes of tracking, we track all flour and shake and trim and keef by weight in Maine. It's just for consistency across the board, so it follows all the way through for every licensee, including retail. So for raw pre-rolls, those are recorded by weight, even at retail sale. So I'm a little bit lost about how it's sold at retail. That's not how it's recorded in Metrc, or how it shouldn't be recorded that way. Pre-roll or raw pre-roll at retail that way. So I guess the short answer is that the OCP did consider the pros and cons of recording raw pre-rolls by weight or by count. And we followed Metrc's advice, actually, who had seen it done different ways in different states. And we actually follow their advice about keeping it by weight across the board. This just makes it easier, especially when you're deducting quantities and trying to track weights across multiple licensees and across the system. So we'll certainly keep it as a consideration, but at this point in Maine, we're keeping it by weight across the board for data analytics purposes, really, and tracking purposes.
Excellent. Thank you, John. All right. Additional questions on functionality and API before we move to training and user experience. All right. Questions on training and user experience. Kelly, please remember to unmute yourself and introduce yourself before your question.
Hi, yes, my name is Matthew. I work with Royal Leaf Apothecary in Aroostook County. I was just wondering if the training on Metrc is like required by the state. Like, do we need to keep certificates of completion on file for employees? Or is that just like a tool that is suggested to be used to learn the system?
So my team can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm fairly certain that there's not sort of required hours logged and items like that. What I will say, however, is a lot of the questions that we have that come into the office, whether they're in writing or whether they're by phone calls, end up being issues that licensees are having in terms of just making mistakes in the day-to-day process that we're happy to help correct those mistakes, obviously. A lot of them end up not being system problems. That's not to say that those types of problems don't pop up, but the vast majority of them tend to be user error issues. And so obviously the training tools that exist through Metrc rather, are important to keep up with, particularly as changes pop up. But also one of the things that we find is as operations are changing within a business is starting to produce something new or venture into a different part of the operation. It's important to really continue to keep up with previous trainings to make sure that you're cutting down on those types of user errors and to make sure that obviously you're not encountering those types of delays. I know, Vern, this is something that you're an evangelist about as well, but please feel free to hop in if I've missed anything.
No, I think you hit it right on the head, John. And we firmly believe that the best way to operate smoothly in Metrc is to try to avoid mistakes from the beginning, which is why we're preaching training and working hard to try to get the sandbox environment up for folks. We're still pursuing that. We have not forgotten. It remains a big piece of one of the things we want to see come out of this.
Thanks for the question, Matthew.
No problem. Thank you.
Any other questions related to training and user experience? All right. Seeing none, let's hop to reports and testing. Any questions related to reports and testing? Kimber.
Hello. I have two questions. I believe I asked this last time. I'm sorry, I don't remember where we were at. Do we have any ability to pull a retroactive report? I know that there was, we can pull a report that shows like current data or like this last month's data, but I can't pull like an inventory report from 6 months ago. Is there any way we can get functionality for that?
Don, do you want to take that?
Yep, I can respond to that. Actually, this is one of the items that Metrc did respond to in the response link. So they did acknowledge that Metrc currently has very limited functionality here. So you mentioned an inventory report. They do have a point in time inventory report that has some limitations. It's the end of the day report where you can run it and look at something as how your inventory looked at a particular day in the past. But besides that, their system really isn't configured for that at the moment for other types of reports. That's the way it exists right now. It is a known system limitation. There are a lot of third-party vendors that might give you additional reporting features. There might be a glimmer of hope in the future. We can't promise anything at this point. But Metrc as a company is looking to integrate with other technology. You might have heard of a company called Salesforce before. They're a very large player in the world of data analytics and reporting. Again, we can't talk about any specifics yet. This is something that Metrc hasn't done yet. It's a direction that they're heading in the future. but there's certainly the possibility that you'd see new reports and new functionality over the course of time. Will that include the ability to do more of those retroactive reports? Too early to tell, honestly. I think it would be a migration where you'd see existing functionality move over first, and then you might see new functionality added in. But at this point, you are correct. Right now in Metrc, really the only functionality that exists for those retroactive reports is that one retroactive inventory report, and even that has some limitations.
Got it.
Kimber, you said you had a couple of questions, but before you jump to the second one, I just wanted to flag for both you and Helena, who had asked about issues related to third-party vendors. Lexi has dropped into the chat box right now information for third-party vendors on obtaining access to the Metrc API in Maine. So that might be a helpful resource to both of you and perhaps others on the call. But sorry to interrupt you. Please go on with your second question.
No, thank you very much for that. My second question is about the reports, the data within the reports themselves. Specifically, I just pulled like a packages adjustment report, and the data, if you pull it in Excel, like kind of the point of Excel is to house data and then sort it and filter it and use that for whatever your needs are. When I get a report from Metrc and I pull it into Excel, the data isn't in a box in a usable way. And I find I have to format the report quite a lot in order to get what I need out of it. So as an example, I pulled the packages adjustments, and one of the columns tells me how much weight was adjusted, but it says like 31.5 grams and 3.5 grams. And like technically it should just say 3.5 and not have that unit within the cell, because now I have to go in and delete that from every single cell. If I have 150 of those, I have to delete 150 letters from each individual cell in order to have a report that I can like sort and work with in a functional way. So I didn't know if there was a way, like it seems reasonable that they might be able to put the unit in its own column and then the number in its own column when we sort the reports or when we pull reports.
Feel like me
Just
to
to-
take that one? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, please, John.
Yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying, Kimber, and I think the response is similar, that Metrc is starting to take a look at Salesforce, and it might give them opportunities to expose the data in new ways. I think that part of the consideration for Metrc will be that behind the scenes, the data might be split out that way in the Metrc backend, but if they provide users with the data the raw way that it's stored in the system, some folks' heads might explode too. It's not very user-friendly at all. So I think that they probably would want to strike a balance between making the data usable. And I think the scenario that you're describing is, yeah, folks can handle that. Put the text in one field and the numeric value in another. That's totally reasonable. So I think that they'll have tremendous opportunities to do something like that after they make the move to Salesforce, but it might be a little while before they get to that level. Right now, their tool that they're using is very basic because developing end user reports wasn't the primary focus of Metrc at the time. It was to be a regulator's tool set. So they're kind of expanding their product to provide more functionality to end users by making this move towards Salesforce. So I think there's hope for the future. I definitely understand the pain point that you're having right now.
And Kimber, just a quick follow-up there, realizing that the issues that you're having and the ways that those reports end up transferring into Excel can be varied in a lot of ways. One little quick sort of user trick for Excel is if you're trying to get rid of like the G for grams in it, you can highlight all of the data that you're interested in adjusting that to and use Control H, and that'll pull up the replace all box, and you could just put the G in and replace it with nothing, and it very quickly gets rid of all your G's. And so if you do encounter an issue like that, Control H is a really handy tool. It sucks that you have to deal with it. I'm sensitive to that. But if it is something where you do have to just get rid of the same character attached to a bunch of numbers, that's a quick little shortcut rather than the manual.
No, that's super helpful. It's not the only pain point. There, like,
Of course.
there are some other things, but yeah, that's the biggest one that's been on my plate this week. But like just for Excel, I feel like if a report is put into like a PDF, like if we hold up an Acrobat, then yeah, it should be pretty and it should have the logo and everything, and it can have the units right next to it. But if it's in Excel, it's not meant to be pretty. It doesn't need to be pretty. It doesn't have to have all the flowery everything. But yeah, I'll wait for the Salesforce stuff. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Director Hudak, if I can just clarify one thing, I've been saying Salesforce. Tableau is owned by Salesforce right now. Tableau is probably a name that you've heard a little bit more about. They're owned by Salesforce, so that might be that might make more sense if I said Tableau rather than Salesforce. Same company, really. But they're more known for their data analytics and presentation model. Same company.
Thanks for that clarification. Vern, you jumped off mute. Did you have a follow-up there before we jump to Elena?
Well, I just wanted to, I don't want to be the wet blanket on it, but, you know, Tableau is a work in progress with Metrc, but we haven't seen any promise dates on it or anything else. So, you know, please don't leave the call with the assumption that, hey, in the next week or two, we're going to see Tableau. We have zero idea for when any Tableau functionality would be coming forward, but we have been briefed by Metrc that it is a priority of theirs and one of the bigger projects that they're excited about. But I just wouldn't want to set any expectations around the imminency of that. And then the other thing I wanted to just kind of add in here, and this is just kind of also level setting. So with regard to limited functionality of reports in Metrc, you know, Metrc is primarily a tool for regulators, right? And by virtue of all the information that's gathered in there, it also has a lot of information that folks who are users, who are industry folks, would like to have access to for reports and things like that, which makes perfect sense. But some of the reasons why there's limited functionality around reporting go back to the idea that it was built as a regulator's tool and not an all-around tool, which is why, you know, we recommend, you know, some sort of a third-party integrator as somebody that might be able to do a better job of that. And I won't pretend to know the ins and outs of any of the third-party integrators because I've never used them. But I have, you know, I have heard a lot of success stories around that. So, and I know that the limited reporting functionality is a pain point for industry. So I just wanted to kind of level set that. So folks don't, you know, I would view reporting features and functionality like that as an added bonus to Metrc, not something that we ever envision Metrc providing as part of what we contract with them to do.
Thank you, Vern. Helena.
Hi, Helena from Coastal Roots. My question is the testing information we fill out through Nova on leaf tag, does that count as our OCP? Because it's all of the same information. I just wanted a clear answer on if that counts as of the OCP we need when sending out testing.
Vern, do you want to take that?
I will give it a shot and then John can come in and correct me when I'm wrong, but the test results get reported through Nova, through all the testing labs. Those test results get reported into Metrc and they get reported into OCP separately. And my understanding is that Nova is feeding the third-party integrator for you. So the data should be exactly the same.
Okay, so that is in compliance with OCP, and that's what we need to do is, that's all we need to do is do the leaf tag through Nova, and then that OCP information is covered.
I'm not sure I'm following what you're doing with that leaf tag info. Because for labeling, you're reviewing the COA which, you're getting through leaf tag and saying, yes, it's passed, and you're going to say on your label, it's passed all mandatory testing. What else are you thinking about? Or am I missing anything?
Well, it's different for all the other labs. It kind of varies, and Nova's the only one where you have to go through leaf tag. You don't need to like have any separate information, and they have it all through leaf tag. I just want to make sure that's all we need to have covered as far as like information with that testing.
Okay, so is leaf tag, I may not understand the question correctly. Is leaf tag Nova's way of reporting out the COAs?
Yep, it's all the information for your testing is leaf tag for Nova.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought leaf tag was a third-party integrator that you were using. Yeah, I mean, leaf tag is just the way the Metrc has Nova has of sending you that information. It's just a more automated process. So, I don't know the exact accuracy of that. I have to assume that it's accurate. If that's the version that they're reporting it out to you on.
Okay.
Would you like me to try to jump in here, Vern? Maybe together we can.
Yeah, if you can clarify that in any way, I feel like I've done a terrible job. So,
Well, I gotta be honest with you, I'm a little bit lost too on the question, and I'm not familiar with leaf tag, but I will say this. When it comes to mandatory test results, Metrc is a system of record. Okay, so it's great that testing facilities are providing the COAs to their licensees. But my understanding is that when it comes to the OCP determining if a given package has met its mandatory testing requirements, it's the data that's in Metrc that we're using to determine if it's met those mandatory testing requirements. So it's what we're seeing in Metrc, which has been uploaded by the lab either through a third-party API or some other mechanism. That's what we're using to evaluate that. If the testing facility is sending you a COA or sending the OCP a COA, that's great. But at the end of the day, it's the data that's in Metrc that is the official record. If others at the OCP need to correct me on that, we can have someone else take a look at that, but that is my understanding. So okay. We can certainly follow up with, say, the policy team on that afterwards if need be. But, I want to make sure that folks don't think that a PDF copy of a COA alleviates them of the need to make sure that the data is correct in Metrc. That's not the case, as I understand it.
Okay. Yep. The data is all correct. We're just trying to make sure we have all our information at the facility that we need to have, as far as like what we're supposed to have records of and keep track of. So I just want to make sure that us having, we have an Excel spreadsheet of all our information and we have everything down, and that leaf tag information going through them, everything's right in Metrc, and having the Excel is enough. We don't need more information or anything else. I just wanted to make sure that that's good.
Yeah. I mean, the most important thing is the Metrc piece, that the data is complete, accurate, and timely in Metrc.
Okay.
That's the most important piece. Not that the other pieces in the COA aren't important, but you're talking to the data guy. The Metrc is the most important to me.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Rebecca, you're up next.
Hi, I'm actually going off of Helena's question. My name is Rebecca O'Connor. I work with Rugged Roots and Centimia here in Maine. I'm wondering if you're talking about the COC, the chain of custody form, which several of the testing facilities require that we fill out before sending them the Metrc manifest, and alternatively, Nova Testing Labs uses their system called Tagleaf to submit that. So in our own facility, we have an internal form that we use for our chain of custody to make sure that we're recording, who's taking the test sample, the time, all that good stuff. and then we take that handwritten form to Tagleaf to enter this in. But when we use other testing facilities, they give us a copy of a chain of custody form to fill out that's specific to their company. And I'm just wondering if that's what you're talking about, Helena?
That is what I'm referring to. And it's that information exactly is what it's different through, because with the Nelson and the other stores, you have that paper information and that paper copy and all the information there. So yes. So you write a form out handwritten for Nova?
Yeah, we have an internal form that we use at all of our facilities that's the same, but we kind of copy and paste the information that different labs need onto their own forms. But Nova is the one that's specific. They don't take a paper form, they just take the Tagleaf information and then they sign your Metrc manifest or trip ticket.
Okay, thank you.
Vern and John, does that clarification change your answers at all, or are we good?
It's hugely helpful. It puts it into a different world. I wasn't thinking chain of custody at all, which is a different thing that's required of testing facilities. I was completely focused on test results. So thank you very much, Rebecca, for jumping in there and putting us in an entirely different world. That helps hugely. Thank you.
Yes, same on my end. I wasn't in chain of custody land at all. So it doesn't change the answer, the response, but it does. Certainly, it enlightens the question, forms it better. So thank you for that, Rebecca.
Teamwork makes the dream work, everyone. Any additional questions reported to related to reports and testing? All right. So seeing none, I'm happy to jump into the sort of potpourri round related to Metrc. Does anyone have any other questions not related to the categories that we ran through, or questions that popped up in the previous categories that you didn't ask? Elena, is that a new hand raise or a delayed one?
Oh, that's a new one.
Okay, what's up?
Okay, so my two questions are related. So I have negative clones in my computer system that it won't, like in Metrc, that it won't let me get rid of. Because usually to get rid of clones, you just destroy clones the amount you have. Well, because Metrc is having a refreshing problem, so like normally I'd enter stuff in and go in, but now I have to refresh anytime I do anything, and it didn't see that I deleted clones originally, and so it let me delete the same amount of clones again, which created negative clones. I did call Metrc and talk about this, and they said there was nothing I could do about that. They'll just be in there forever. And my follow-up question was she had mentioned enter your error in your Metrc logbook, and here's the ticket number for this call if you have any problem when you guys get run through with the state or anything like that. And I just wanted to see, we were unaware about like having a specific Metrc logbook for any problems. Is that something we should make sure we have here, like just a file for it or something specific?
John, did you raise your hand on that one?
I did. I want to make sure Vern would agree with me. So I don't think we've talked about having a specific Metrc logbook. There are situations where it's appropriate just to give the state a heads up. Vern, if you're in agreement, I'd say that the best thing to do is just send a quick notification email to OCP compliance. We'll just get it on record here. It's great that you reached out to support. We strongly suggest that be the first step for everyone. At a minimum, now you have it in a log at Metrc. So when you do email compliance, do make note of the ticket number that Metrc support gave you. And then we've got it documented in 2 places, and everything is covered. And I apologize that Metrc can't undo that particular mistake for you. Rest assured, we will not come looking for those negative clones. I can promise you that. I feel confident in that.
Okay, that's
We'll get it documented and then you'll be all set. I don't think you necessarily need to start your own Metrc logbook on site. We'll get it documented on our site.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, Matthew?
Yes, Matthew Knight of Royal Leaf Apothecary. I actually just started working at this dispensary about a few months ago, but I've worked in a dispensary in Colorado for 5 years. So I know how to use Metrc, but when I got here, their Metrc system was kind of, they have a lot of negative packages like she was just talking about. I was just wondering about the adjusting of those. Is the trick really just to include as much data as possible in the notes? Because I can literally see where the package was adjusted down 170 grams and it's overall 170 grams short. So would it just be to associate it with that first adjustment that was erroneous and then to going ahead and adjusting the package to 0? Or is there something else that we should do instead?
John or Vern?
I don't have an answer for that. I actually just put a little asterisk next to Helen's question and your question too. I want to follow up a little bit more with Metrc on that. It seems to me like the kind of thing that we should be able to correct for. So I'll be the first one to tell you I'm not satisfied with the response from Metrc that you can't fix that negative mistake. And I'm also wondering what that also does going down the line. So I'm going to be following up with Metrc on that and see if there's a way to correct that. It seems like there should be, whether it's through a package adjustment or how it is, but I'm going to have to follow up on that. I appreciate you bringing the question forward. I wish I had a more satisfactory answer, but I don't like what I'm hearing, so we'll dig in a little bit more on that, and we're going to have to get back to you folks on that.
And Matthew, to clarify on your question, the functionality that you're looking for here in Maine is a functionality you experienced with Metrc in another state, correct?
So far, every aspect of Metrc here is identical to what I experienced in Maine. Like everything has been the exact same.
Okay. Got it. Thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions related to Metrc? Well, it looks like there are none. Thank you, everyone. There are some questions that either came in prior to this or in the chat during it, which we didn't address because they were questions that we are going to follow up with Metrc, and happy to provide those answers in the coming months. I want to thank all of you for participating today and for what was a good, robust discussion. I think we got to a lot of your questions, but I'm happy to continue that conversation, as I said, with Metrc, and we're committed to relaying those answers in writing. This recording is going to be available on OCP's YouTube page. And moving forward, as I noted at the outset, we're committed to continuing to host these calls on a quarterly basis. We know new questions pop up, old questions linger, et cetera. And so we're committed to being able to bridge that gap as much as possible. Finally, there's a post-meeting survey that's going to be sent to all participants. It is also available right now in the chat. Lexi just posted it in the chat function. Please feel free to share your feedback about this call, about the previous call as well. We look forward to hearing your feedback on that, and we look forward to seeing you in Q3 for the next Metrc user call. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.